What's up again, everybody? Earlier today, around noon my time, Haunted Castle Gaming made the surprising and unfortunate announcement that they were going to be closing their doors indefinitely, and the board game and like TCG hybrid, if you will, the tactical trading card game Genesis Battle of Champions, was officially seeing its final sunset. And that, I'm not going to lie, made me a little bit sad because after, playing this game with my family, teaching it to my kids, and then, of course, going and commentating their World Championship back in November, I thoroughly enjoyed the times that I've gotten to experience with this game. Today, I wanted to talk about the life cycle of trading card games and how almost every trading card game will see something like this. And that's a really unfortunate thing, but even good card games will die. And while we do that, I figured we would dive into this product. By the way, this is the beta starter kit. It is not necessarily completely randomized. It has a couple packs in it, but it also has like a bunch of product that you can get. These are hard to find nowadays, and personally, I actually really enjoyed the way that they did their older lettering and labeling. But I want to talk about this candidly because I didn't write anything down, and I thought it would be an opportunity to talk at the close of a game. And basically, I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story that I experienced. And this dives into a lot of different topics, but I guess there's a lot of topics about, or a lot of lessons we can learn, I guess is the better way to say it, when it comes to trading card games, their expectations, what you can expect in the market, and I guess tribalism. There's a little bit of tribalism talk that we'll talk about. But I want to preface this with a story of the last time I truly experienced the death of a card game. Before we get to that story, though, if you don't know the contents of this box, or the game Genesis Battle of Champions, is a solid little game where you have a gridded board like this, and you have a champion that you're going to move around on that board, and you can take actions like moving, very similar to Dungeons & Dragons, like moving around that board if you've ever played with a movement system. And so you take your move, and then you can attack, or you can, in this case, you can kind of like beckon in summons. If you don't know what that means, it's basically just summoning things onto the board that can also move around and attack and try to take down your opponent who has a life total, and you have a life total as well. Cards look like this back in the day. I actually preferred this like scroll-like text on the bottom with this the splash art kind of action thing there. I think this is actually really cool. Very nostalgic in a way because it reminds me of like old I don't know, 90s or 2000s sensibilities and stylings, and I actually don't mind that at all. I know some people probably want something that looks a little bit more updated. And in fact, later this week, I'm doing an unboxing for another game that has a little bit of an update. Spoiler alert, as far as their UI is concerned, their UX and their UI. The other contents, by the way, and we're going to flip through these cards as we talk, as I tell you my story, but the other contents of this box are those tokens. Some great dice, by the way. I actually use these dice when I play a variety of games. They're just large D6s that are hefty, and red and white, black and white. And two packs, two beta booster packs. And I really like the beta cards. I like the way that they look. So I want to tell you a story about the last time I experienced the death of a card game and the perspective that I gained from it, because it was a surprisingly poignant moment when I realized how I felt about it. And that is the game Star Wars Destiny. So I picked up Star Wars Destiny from the outset. I bought into the first set fairly heavily. I bought into the second set incredibly heavily. I played it a lot. I thoroughly enjoyed it because I played it with my friends, and that was a huge, huge portion, is that I was playing it with my friends. Eventually, I fell out of favor with it simply because as my friends and I played it, we started to find some of those early unbalanced decks, unbalanced experiences, and we realized over the course of like tournaments and play that man, it was really unfun to just play that game at a high level and crush your friends. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to set this down for a bit. Man, this card is so cool looking. And that is just my personal experience with it. I know it was, in general, a lot of fun. And I still think that game is a lot of fun. I don't play it anymore. I don't have my stuff anymore because I did sell my collection to someone that was going to use it after it sat for a good long while. But I had a lot of it. But there was this interesting tribalism that kind of happened with that game because I played Dice Masters a good bit as well. I played both games at the same time, and there was this big shift when the Star Wars Destiny CCG came out from Dice Masters to that, and there was this sensibility, this like at the local game store level that I was at. There was this belief that, now that a Star Wars trading card game is out, it's time to, bounce out of Dice Masters because that game is going to die. And, if you don't, then you're kind of a chump for sticking around and not just getting rid of your cards and getting value out of them for what you see fit. And I thought that was like disingenuous. It was like, we've been enjoying a game together called Dice Masters. And yes, a new game comes out, Star Wars Destiny. I enjoyed it. Some of my friends enjoyed it. Then there were some other people that sort of poked fun at still playing the game Dice Masters while this brand new game came out. And so that created, the tribalism that existed created this, I guess, bias in my mind against the game that I eventually gave up and moved on from, which I guess made it easier to give up and move on from in some ways. And I kind of stayed out of the overall community, as it were, from Star Wars Destiny after I kind of stepped away from it and stopped playing the game with my friends, who also stopped playing the game, interestingly enough, now that I think about that. Nevertheless, eventually, the news came out and down the line that Star Wars Destiny was seeing its final days. And I remember feeling these feelings in order. Feeling 1, triumph, as it in the game of Star Wars Destiny that was supposed to kill Dice Masters did not even survive through, the number of years that Dice Masters had been around up till that point. And there was this strange sense of triumph that I stuck with Dice Masters as almost as if hey, I made the right call. I was on the right side of history, which is absurd when you think about it. And I think that's the exact wrong take. But I believe that I was encouraged that way. And I chose to believe that because of the, I guess, the hostility, if you will, of playing, Dice Masters while the other game existed, while Destiny existed. But I went to listen to a podcast on the day that the game was announced to be dead. Gosh, look at this art. It's cool. I don't know. Something about the colors and just the way it looks, I really like. And I listened to this podcast, and I listened to these people talk on this podcast, and they sounded defeated, and they sounded disappointed, and they sounded sad. And I started to realize that I was sad for them because it wasn't necessarily that my game was better. And it wasn't necessarily that my game was better because it lasted longer. It was a feeling of disappointment, being let down, something beautiful that you enjoyed being taken away. And you enjoyed it because you did it with your friends. You had a fun experience with your friends, and it meant something to you. And as I was listening to this, I started to realize how stupid I had been. I started to think, I played that game with my friends. I enjoyed that experience of rolling up with Po Maz. That was a good game. And for one reason or another, it was gone. It was sort of taken from the community. And at that point, I didn't really consider myself part of the community as much. But I started to remember and started to relate to the people that were talking on the podcast. And I started to understand in a deeper way what it means for a game to die at its most fundamental sense. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the whys or the how did this happen or things like that. But those points, while perhaps interesting, are sort of off to the side. They're ancillary. I think the biggest point in all of this is that there's an experience that many people have shared together, and it's okay to feel bad about it. And it's okay for a game at some point or another to die. That it's not a sign of failure. And then it's not something to, I guess, celebrate over, unless there's a good reason that we are, celebrating the death of a game. I don't know any specifics, but I know that there are games out there that have gone the way of the dodo, as it were, simply because of, not being very good games, just straight up, or not having a good community or a supportive, community. Wow, that art is beautiful. That's really nice. Not having, its own mechanics that make it mechanically unique. There's a lot of dead games out there. I mean, you can literally go look through a variety of YouTube channels that cover TCGs and dead games and things like that. Super fascinating topic. But I started to realize when Star Wars Destiny died that the idea of one game being better than another and, watching a community, unfortunately, be pushed apart through the collapsing of their shared communal experience was just a straight up bad feeling. And while the game itself was, oh man, that art is beautiful. Look at that. While the game itself was good, it, for one reason or another, was chosen not to be continued. And this is kind of how I feel about Genesis. And it brings us back to Genesis after looking through these Genesis starter decks. This, to me, was a game that, and is a game, because I do think it is going to be continued by the community, is a game that has a lot of its own unique personality and flair. It's a game that functions really well. It's a game that if you can find the cards for, by the way, you should definitely consider trying the game out. I mean, just from a gameplay standpoint and experiencing it, it's a game that I think plays well, and surprisingly so, when you actually sit down to learn and play with a friend. And it's whether or not it should have died or, what led to its cancellation, I think it's worth taking a second look at and taking an opportunity to play with. Because to me, it was a fun game that had a lot going for it, and I was quite surprised that it did indeed go this way. All right, let's see what's inside this beta booster pack. There's some beautiful cards in here, and a couple of cards that really look great. The print run, I felt like was worse along, but actually I'm seeing, there's little nicks on here, a couple of nicks there. I'm seeing a lot of nice quality overall. The cardstock definitely feels like kind of rougher than like later printings, of course. Dark strength. Look, this is cool looking. I'm not going to lie. Over the course of the game, like Welcome to J. Lara and then like the reprint J2, like the art went in different directions in certain cases. I actually think this was, in my opinion, this was the set that had the best art. Like you look at this, that is an evocative card. That is a card that makes you want to just like, okay, I need to know more about this card because I want to play that card. It's not like look at that. Like man. You put this art on a card with like a parchment scroll thing. I mean, you have me hooked. I love that. I think that's quite fantastic myself. But then again, I'm just kind of a sucker for that. That's just me. And then, of course, Nubia, which I thought was the coolest little character design. I thought it was a great little character design. Fortification. The rare, by the way, in that pack was the Vampiric Kiss, a card that actually I talked with Osset about, and is a really, really cool card, and one of my favorite arts in the set. This one, though, I forgot this art existed. That's quite cool. In fact, funny story, I was actually, a week ago, scouting around to try and find a couple of cards for a deck that I wanted to actually build. A couple of the cards are kind of hard to find nowadays, specifically because some of these cards are printed only in one set and hadn't been reprinted. So like Ajna Tigers, for example, I was looking to, I wanted to play Kato Tigers. So that was, if you know Genesis, I wanted to build Kato Tigers. That was my hope. And so I was like kind of scouting around to see if I could buy Tigers. Wow, that is actually unhinged. I wanted to buy Tigers, and I just kind of got sidetracked at the time, and I never got back to trying to find some. I was like looking on eBay and stuff like that, and never got an opportunity to go back to that. I love that Skeleton King. That's a cool art. It's like thematically, it doesn't necessarily fit in the same way, but it's kind of cool. I like art that stands out like that. Malik. Hey, look, it's the Libraries of Sahas. Again, that is a pretty cool little piece right there. Lambs for the slaughter. And so, I don't know. I guess to sum up my thoughts, and I know it's a bit of a rambly video, and I apologize for the rambly nature of it. I guess I'm just thinking through how I've experienced the death of a card game before. Wow. God, this card's so cool. And just thinking through how I've experienced before and how a game like Genesis, with a lot going for it, seemed to just kind of come out of nowhere. I didn't expect it, and yet it's still a fantastic game. And even though it is no longer supported by the company that created it, I do think that there's a lot to love with this, and it's unfortunate that we kind of survive in this space, in the TCG community, where good games, in my opinion, Genesis is one, good games like this are going to perhaps see the end of their life cycle. Not every game can be a Magic the Gathering. Otherwise, they would all be a Magic the Gathering. Not every game would be a Pokemon. Otherwise, they would all be a Pokemon. Not even Yu-Gi-Oh! Can oftentimes be Yu-Gi-Oh! No, that's me. That's not very spirited. I actually like Yu-Gi-Oh! But not every game can be one of those big three. And that's the unfortunate reality, is that eventually some of these card games are going to reach the end of their life cycle. So when you're there at the end of your life cycle, you have to reassess, and this is kind of the ending point, what the whole point was. What was the point of the journey? And if the point of your journey in a TCG is to enjoy and experience along with your friends and the members of the community, well, then if that TCG lasts 6 months, 3 years, 5 years, 25 years, does it really matter if it goes the way that it may end up going? Because you got to make memories with the people that you enjoyed making them with, and with the game that you enjoyed. And I think that is hopefully what we can all take away when a game ends up moving on. Like a Keyforge, right? Like a Star Wars Destiny, or like a Genesis Battle of Champions. So that's what I've been thinking about today. Thinking about a lot of that today. Let me know what you think about dead card games in a comment below. I know it's a bit of a different video, but I felt like making this. Tomorrow we're going to have a pretty fun video, some flesh and blood content. But for today, I think it's worth paying homage to a game that did something unique in the space, and for me, left its imprint. As always, thanks for watching.